Have you ever been in the middle of a conversation or maybe even just anticipating one and you feel this sudden rush, like this urgency, this almost physical pressure to say something, to clarify something, to make sure the other person understands your side before things get worse? I mean, your mind speeds up, your thoughts start tripping over each other. You're already thinking about your explanation before they've even finished speaking. And there's this feeling underneath all of it. Like if you don't get ahead of this right now, something bad is going to happen. Well, that feeling is real. I'm not dismissing it. But I want to offer you something today that has genuinely changed how I show up in my own relationships and conversations, how I coach people I work with. You lose emotional power the moment you rush to explain yourself in order to reduce this discomfort. That urgency you feel, that speed, that pressure is a signal. And when you learn to read it and notice it, maybe things will change for you as well. The very first thing I want to invite you to do, and this is kind of the foundation of everything I'll talk about in this video, is simply to notice. Notice when your mind speeds up. Notice when there's a sudden sense of pressure inside of you, like something needs to happen right now or it's going to be too late. Notice when you're no longer really listening to the other person because you're already 10 steps ahead in your mind or preparing for what you're going to say next or crafting an explanation. That speed, that internal sense of urgency is not your wisdom speaking. It's your nervous system reacting, and it's wise. It's a signal. So think of it like a car engine suddenly revving when you haven't touched the accelerator. Something has triggered it. And when you're running at that speed, you're not driving. You're being driven. And the beautiful thing is, you don't have to do anything with the noticing. You don't have to fix anything or change anything or, think about things more or talk yourself out of anything. Just noticing creates a tiny space between you and the reaction. And that space, well, that's where your actual power lives. When you feel sped up, that's the moment to pause, just to quiet your mind, just recognize what you're feeling, recognize what you're thinking about, just notice. And once you've noticed that speed up feeling, you can kind of separate yourself from it and see what's actually happening. Because that urgency to explain and justify and get ahead of the discomfort, it's coming from somewhere. And if you slow down long enough to just take a little look, maybe you can notice. Maybe you can notice a sense of fear. Maybe you're fearing that you'll be misunderstood, or there's conflict here, or fearing what the other person might think of you, or that if you don't manage this just right, something bad's going to happen. Or maybe there's a judgment. Maybe you're judging them or you're judging yourself. Maybe you have this kind of running internal commentary that it's already decided what this means and who's to blame. Maybe it's some kind of resentment, an old hurt, and it shows up here, kind of shaping how you are hearing that person and hearing everything they have to say. And then notice your behaviors that follow. Justifying, defending, over-explaining, going around and around trying to make a case that never quite lands. Because from this place, the other person can feel that you're not really talking with them. You're talking from the discomfort inside of you. And I want to say this with a lot of compassion because every single one of us does this. Every single one of us has been in that place. But when you're in it, you're not thinking clearly. You're not resourced. You're not operating from your wisest, most grounded self. You're not coming from a place of wisdom. You're coming from that place of discomfort. And that usually leads to not the most desirable outcomes. Now, something that's subtle is when we're in that reactive, fear-based place, it doesn't always feel like fear. Sometimes it feels like logic. It feels like I'm just trying to explain my perspective. I'm trying to be understood. I'm trying to resolve this. And of course, those are not bad goals. But the urgency behind them, the pushing, the feelings, the repeating yourself or needing the other person to see it your way, that's not wisdom. That's anxiety wearing wisdom's clothing. And the other person can feel the difference. Even if they can't name it, they can feel when you're talking from that defensive, contracted place. And it tends to make them contract as well. And now you're both in this space, both reactive, both not really hearing each other, both trying to win an argument. And we can't create genuine connection from this place. We can't solve a real problem from this place, this reactive, contracted space. Because the energy underneath, it's not let's understand each other. It's I need this discomfort to stop. And discomfort doesn't stop because you explained yourself more. It stops when you address what's actually happening, which is almost always something much quieter and more tender than the surface argument suggests. So, what do you do when you notice that you're in this space? You're feeling this discomfort, this pressure, this urgency. Well, something that works for me is to breathe. The Latin root for breathe is spirare, which also gives us words like inspire, inspirit, respiration, and aspire. At its core, spirare doesn't just mean the physical act of breathing. It points to something deeper. To breathe is to be alive, to be moved, to be filled with energy or spirit. So when we say inspire, it literally means to breathe into, not just air, but life, creativity, clarity. And there's something beautiful in this. Your breath isn't just keeping you alive. It's constantly renewing your connection to clarity, presence, and possibility. So in a very real sense, every breath is both survival and creation. That's beautiful. It's a quiet reminder that life is happening through you, not just to you. And this is physiology. This is you literally taking the wheel back from your nervous system. I really like box breathing. Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4. I do this 2 or 3 times and I can feel the calmness. What happens in those breaths is very real. Your heart rate begins to slow. The cortisol that's been flooding your system starts to ease. Our prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for perspective and judgment and wisdom, starts to come back online. And we move from reactive to receptive, from defensive to present. And here's what I want you to notice after you give that a try is the urgency doesn't feel quite so urgent anymore. The thing you're about to say or might still say or not say is different. It's coming from a higher spirit or a higher feeling with more space around it, less grip. And you're not working on stopping the discomfort. You're sitting with it long enough to actually understand it. And that's really where good conversations begin. That's where we can resolve our problems. We can hear one another. We can listen to one another. We can be with one another. Breathing is a return to yourself. It's that pause, that space. Maybe give it a try. What I've seen around the difference between reacting and responding, it's not just semantic. When you react, you're being moved by what's happening outside of you. The other person's tone or their words, the story in your head about what they mean. And you're at the mercy of it all. When you respond from a place of clarity, from a settled nervous system, from a mind that isn't racing, you're coming from inside out. You're not being controlled by what's going on. You're just present to it. And from this place, you have access to things you simply don't have when you're in reaction mode. You have access to compassion for yourself and for the other person. You have access to truth and less defense. You have access to your own wisdom, which knows far more about this situation than your anxious, speeding mind. Responding from clarity doesn't mean you become passive. It doesn't mean you don't say hard things or stand your ground, but it means that the hard things land differently. They land with love and respect, and people hear that. I've noticed that when I reduce my discomfort and start speaking from a place of genuine clarity, the entire dynamic of a conversation shifts. So the next time you feel that rush, that speed up, that urgency, that pressure to say something right now before this gets worse, I invite you to pause just for a moment, breathe, and ask yourself, am I speaking from clarity right now? Or am I speaking to make the discomfort stop? What you say and what you hear will often be more connected from this place. In the pause, in the quiet, in the breath that brings you back to yourself. That's where the power is. That's where your power is. That's who you are. And from that place, you can say anything, and it will always land the way it was meant to. Speaking from this place of love.